You're on, George.
Welcome, George Caponelli here. This is session 4 on day 2 of the Masculine Dialogues, and it's terrific to have you here with us. Um, our topic for this session is called Man in Relationship to Women. Quite a topic. In fact, some of you may be wondering how we could have the audacity to try to cover a topic of this scope in only 90 minutes. The only thing I can suggest to you is that you not throw in the towel yet. We have a really terrific panel of men and women, talented, mature, interesting men and women who are going to help us take a next step on this journey that is one of the oldest in time. In fact, it's been an ongoing topic since Zeus was reputed to have found human beings they were becoming too powerful. And so he decided to divide them into male and females and send them off across the universe in search of each other. The only thing I can say is that as I look around at the state of our world today, we still have a long way to go on that journey. But we're going to cover some good territory today. Before I introduce our panel and share a little bit about the sessions that occurred yesterday and this morning, I'd like to do a little balancing process. So if I can ask you to just kind of sit back a little bit and close your eyes. And as you listen to this music, what I ask you to do is to form a connection between your head and your heart. Create what's called heart-head coherence. There we are. That our friends in HeartMath had a great deal to do with spreading around the world. And as the music plays, experience that connection. See if you can deepen it and enrich it, and just enjoy it. Oh, that felt good, didn't it? Um, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday and this morning, the only thing I can say is you missed 3 really terrific sessions. And I don't say that out of any ego as being one of the folks that is, along with Jim and Lion, that have helped organize these masculine dialogues, but because of the quality and the depth of the individuals who have been gracious enough to participate with us. Yesterday morning, Jim Line and I opened with an overview on the dialogues themselves, and then we were joined by Michael Mead. Many of you know he's one of the consummate storytellers and mythologists of our time. And Michael shared his perspectives on soul work and how the history of the men's movement has led us to this particular point in time. In the afternoon at noon yesterday, we had a second session that was called Man in Relationship to Soul. And Michael joined us again, and he was joined as well by Greg Braden, Thomas Moore, Larry Dawsey, Gordon DeViren, and Mark Goodman. And we took the subject deeper, and it's always fascinating when men of this caliber come together, the insights and the perspectives that they can share with us. And then this morning, Lion Goodman hosted a really wonderful panel called Breaking Out of the Man Box. And just a terrific group of men. And one of the things that I said to all of them in honor of who they are and the work that they do, that, we live in a world where men are often disparaged for being out of sync and unwilling to collaborate and engage. And yet these men on the panel are such examples that make me proud to be a man, of doing work that is just so good, so decent, so integrous. And I think they give every young man in the world who encountered them hope, and they give us that are older some lessons in remembering the things and the work that we still need to do. So you can watch each of those sessions for 24 hours after they originally aired. And then at the end of the dialogues, you'll have an opportunity to watch all of the series. So let's talk about man in relationship to women. I want to tell you a story that gives you a sense, perhaps, of how complicated I know this topic is. A number of years ago, I was living in Santa Monica, California, and I spent an afternoon, as I often did, wandering around a bookstore. And as I passed a shelf, this title kind of leaped out at me, and it was Everything That Men Know About Women. So I was really interested. I picked up the book. I opened the cover, and the inside page was blank, as were the first few. And I thought at first that I had a defective book. But then the more I flipped, the more I found that all of the pages in the book were blank. So I had to laugh. It was obviously a terrific publisher's gimmick, but it was more than that.
George,
Yeah.
people are saying your voice is a little low, so maybe you could speak up a little bit today.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Or increase your volume.
I did
Thanks.
both. So, and I thank you for those of you who are listening. I'm sorry if you missed anything that I said, but this blank book with a cover that said Everything That Men Know About Women not only was interesting as a publishing idea, but because it was written by a woman, it was also a reminder of the truth of what she said. For I think men do not know as much about women as they certainly could, and I think the same is true for women about men. As we begin this journey, I want to remind you that what we're going to be doing is a thing called dialogue. And dialogue, the word comes from the Greek dialogos, which means to arrive at greater understanding and truth through active listening and honest sharing. And that's different from discussions, which is what a lot of us do, because discussion comes from the Latin discutere, and it means to shatter into pieces. And we all know that a lot of the dialogue, or a lot of the communication that happens between men and women today does get shattered into pieces. One more thing that I want to say, and I have to get up to get it. 1 second. I think this can help inform and motivate our dialogue today. It's a book, it's called Matri, Letters from the Mother. It's written by Zoanne Nicholson. And Sedina has been encouraging me to read it. And she was encouraged to read it by a friend and collaborator of ours, Jane Pinto. And there's a section here that I read the other day that I want to read a piece of it to you. It says, "Wise people around the world, we have been telling you that the planet is dying. Leaders in every discipline, scientists, teachers, ecologists, writers, poets, artists have been telling you that the planet is dying. You've been told that the land, air, water are becoming polluted beyond repair. You have watched animals lose their natural environments and entire species disappear. Finally, you've witnessed overwhelming poverty, famine, and widespread disease. And everything they have been telling you is true. The planet is dying, but they have been only telling you about the symptoms. They're trying to correct hundreds of symptoms one by one, never addressing the cause. Without recognizing the cause, without correcting the cause, nothing will change. The remedy is not stopping erosion, repairing the ozone, replenishing the forests, and controlling population growth. The planet is dying because the ratio of matter to energy is out of balance. There is not enough Shakti, which means life-giving energy, life-sustaining energy, to support the planet. When all things are in balance, there is a perfect and sustaining presence of Shakti within everything. Then this radiant and vital energy fades. Then this radiant and vital energy will keep things alive. So that's just a couple of paragraphs from this book. So what I want to do now is introduce our panel, and then I'd like to pick up with that as a theme. So Heidi Sparks Guber dedicates her work and research in emergent learning. She's the founding partner of the Four Quadrant Partners, founding chair of the Global Association of SOUL, which stands for Society for Organizational Learning Communities. And she's really just a remarkable woman and a spectacular facilitator of global health. Celeste Kruger is founder and president of Celeste Kruger and Associates, a leadership and organizational development firm dedicated to helping people name their purpose and deliver it with passion. Sedina, who's my wife and partner, is an award-winning author. She is an internationally known consultant and wellness expert. She's the co-founder of Age Nation, of Empower New Mexico, and co-producer of our Ageless Living television series. Gabriela Marcella is consultant, life artist, facilitator, change agent, author, director of Source Consulting, and her latest book is Everyday Magnificent, Practices to Activate an Unlimited Life. Dr. Jacob Lieberman, I have to tell you early on, he's a troublemaker, so I just want you to know that up front. He also happens to be a pioneer in the fields of light, vision, and consciousness. He's an inspiring speaker, lecturer, the author of Luminous Life, How Science of Light Unlocks the Art of Living, and I'm really pleased to call him my friend. So, panel, we're going to begin a dialogue process so you can all both turn on your videos if they're not and unmute your mics. And so I'd like to ask you a question, and the question I'd like to ask you is, do you think we, especially men, can return to that kind of balance, that kind of energetic that is spoken about in Matri? Can we do that in time to actually make a difference in this critical time that we're living in? So Because this is a dialogue, I'd like you to all share as you move to share. And remember that we all want to do a series of rounds. So who'd like to begin?
I'll begin.
Okay.
I get a resounding yes. When an infant is born, whether you put a blue blanket or a pink blanket on it, it has no sense of gender or religiosity or preferences or skin coloration. So it is in fact born in the state that you're speaking. We come into this world, even though energetically we're the present day state of evolution, so that which has preceded is there. Essentially, an infant lives in that state that was described by the third Zen patriarch when he said, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. So my sense is absolutely yes. And the yes that I'm getting is from my own direct experience of being in a loving relationship with my life partner, with my children, with the mother of my children. And what I realize is everything else seems strange.
Hmm. Hmm.
Who else?
I'll say something, George. It's Heidi. The first question I would ask you back is return to what? I mean, have we ever been in that state that you're talking about, other than what Jacob just talked to us about? And is it ever, you can't return, you know, we're in a new, like you can never step in the same river. We're in a new river, and it's a pretty rushing river. So my response, it's interesting that Jacob brought up the example of an infant. My example is of being the mother that delivered an infant. My first experience of delivering a child, I can remember this incredible terror of how in the world something like that gets out of this body. I had no idea. And thanks to a few elders helping me out with their experiences, I did indeed discover that what happens when you're in the process of delivering a child is that the rushes of the hormones flooding your body during the transition period, the period which is least likely to get that body out of that body, that these hormones and all kinds of things come to your aid, and that the bones literally become gelatinous, and the baby can actually emerge into the world without damage to either of you if you're lucky. And so I found in that the coherence with the living system that I was part of in the moment. And one of the ways they describe transition is it's the time where you know that you want to leave the room, that you cannot do this. That's how women know they're in transition, is they literally want to leave. But I found that in the coherence with the living system at that very moment, that the way was right there in the coherence, and that the impossible became possible because it was an entirely different state. So when you ask, can we return? Can we actually return? I'm saying that that the conditions are such that we are in that transition, and that it calls forth a coherence with what's going on that I think leads us to something that right now looks like it. We don't know how it's going to happen, but it is. That's everything that I've been hearing validates that, including the conversations that you had yesterday and today. I heard that over and over again. So I have great hope for that.
Thanks, Heidi. I think that the one place that I have a little bit of disagreement with you, not on your process, of course, because I've never experienced that, at least in this lifetime. But I believe that no matter what state we're in, innocence is always available within us.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm really referring to is coming back to that place
Innocence, yes.
innocence
Mhm.
inside of us that is always there, but then in a lifetime becomes obscured by
Right.
wounding and confusion and interface with the world at large. But
Yeah,
so I just wanted
absolutely.
to clarify that in terms of my question for all of you.
Got
So
it.
who else?
Yeah, I'll step in here. Um, it's just fascinating to me how this all works, these conversations we have. And why I'm saying that right now is this morning, as I was thinking through, what might we talk about today? How might this show up? This quote came to me that I needed to go look up to be sure I had it right. And so I'll read it to you now. And I'm doing that, George, because of what you just said, building on what Heidi said, building on what came before. This is the author and activist Arundhati Roy, the woman who wrote The God of Small Things. The trouble is that once you've seen it, keeping quiet, saying nothing becomes as political an act as speaking out. There's no innocence. Either way, you're accountable. And as I was thinking, and as I am listening right now about these matters, can we return to a place? Is there innocence? And how does that play out in the world you described, or at least as I heard it, Heidi, of that transition space where you just want to run like hell and get out of the room and you cannot? In me, I experience the yes and the no of we can do this because we must. And the no is I see what I see. And the world is in flames, and men and women together are in flames around matters of power and who gets to play with the shiny things.
Mm.
And so I get very interested in where we're going. And what's quite funny is Siri in my ear just said, I didn't get that. Could you try again? I know the feeling. I'll stop there for the moment.
Wow. I'm Sedina. I'll share after that. That was great. So what a wonderful conversation. I'm just so pleased to be part of this important dialogue and to be included in an amazing group of kindred spirits. Thank you, Jim and George and Lion, for including me. And I'm grateful for this question, George. It's a little surprising. And of course, I love the book Matri, and I love her. What she's talking about is obviously, what we're in the middle of. I'm just grateful to be part of a conversation with men as well that moves us positively and proactively toward a sustainable future for our humanity and for this remarkable planet at this such a tenuous time. So to reimagine and reimage the role of the masculine, I think is critical to bring us into this balance that you're talking about. I'm sort of at odds about the return part too, Heidi. I want to add that acknowledgement is I think huge and really critical. To acknowledge individual and collective strengths and weaknesses right now. I think that's what we've been shying away from. If we can co-creatively generate a new story, it's going to come from that. I believe it's going to come from just an acceptance and awareness, an understanding of who we are. And I think, so I was thinking about this very provocative conversation today and the new story. I also thought about, wow, this is so important that we look at our individual stories, because isn't that what's creating this right now on the masculine and the feminine levels? And the story I grew up with was so interesting to think about it. It was based on an old patriarchal and religious model from my parents, teachers, and the church, because at a very young age, I wanted to be a nun. And so the religious and traditional structure was very familial to me too. I didn't have a clue about my feminine role. When we talk about balance, there wasn't balance. It was the priest. It was a completely different orientation, except for my relationship with the Divine Mother. So I'm so grateful to have found this book. I'm just infinitely grateful for that soul connection with the Divine Mother, because through the years, it's given me a deeper understanding of the divine aspect in all of us. And that's not relegated, of course, to just women. There's an internal and an eternal, feminine and masculine in every single one of us. So when we talk about balance, I go back to wholeness. Wholeness, just the acceptance of everything that brought us to where we are right now. Because whether we like it or not, our world is deconstructing at a very, at a clip. And we're in the midst of this huge turning point. Essentially, if we're divine humans having a human experience, divine having a human experience, which I believe we are, I have to agree with many of the indigenous and others that are saying that this could be a chance for us to connect with our souls and evolve into our divine selves. So I look at it all as really a positive thing. I don't have any other choice. That's how I'm feeling right now, that this is really where we're at. We're at a turning point where we can look at in the mirror at who we really are. And it's not going to happen without acceptance of the beauty inside and out and all the other stuff that we want to put names on and labels on. So for now, that's
Thanks,
it.
Nina.
Thank you so much, Dina, all who have spoken. I'm so honored to be in this dialogue that is already so juicy. I hardly know what to respond to first. In essence, I first actually want to bring in the land under our feet, the earth herself. I live in the heart of Texas on the land of the Tonkawa people, the Edwards aquifers, waters that are beneath the earth, the mycelial field, that there's a way that for me, a return that is to wholeness, is to walking in beauty and reverence on this planet, in our bodies, in our relationships, that is a return to innocence, to that playful, childlike wonder that is such a rich, wise medicine, and also a return to the ancient ways, while also agreeing, I'm also a mother who has birthed the baby who feels like I died when I birthed the baby, and I will never go back. I will never return to who that maiden was. And I will only evolve forward, this beauty of emergence that is before us, and that we can only do it together and we can't do it alone. And so there's also a very obvious to all of you, great turning to a new paradigm beyond the mind of separation, beyond anywhere that we have held masculine and feminine and any kind of divisiveness as separate. So we are tasked with a great, great task of our times. And can we make it? For me, it's what I wake up for every single day. It's a love that is worth waking up for and serving with my life. And I don't know where it will go from here. And yet I know that in this body, there's a community of wholeness and unity and compassion and reverence that is discovering any moment how to walk in the way as a conscious, awake heart that is creating a new world that's being created from the inside out. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella.
George, could I share a little more?
Yeah.
What happens for me is, as each person shares, something just naturally surfaces, and a series of things came up for me when Gabriella was speaking. I realized, regardless of the way of the world, there's only one way in which I can go choicelessly.
Mm,
It's my, each of us perhaps have a purpose for being, and regardless of what goes on, I'm choiceless in that particular path. Heidi had mentioned something about, can we return? And what came to me in response to that was, how come some of us forget
mm,
and some of us never forget? And I immediately flashed back on the fact that my own parents were always modeling a team. There wasn't a him and a her. Everything they did was dancing together. And
mm.
then from there, I flashed on to when my children were very young. And for a long period of time, they called me mommy, which for me was like getting the Nobel Prize. And I realize what they saw or what they may have experienced in me was a
Mm,
human being with the body of a Roman soldier and the heart of a woman.
mm,
That maybe we both encompass both of those things. And Celeste said something, and what came to me is, once we know truth, we can no longer lie.
mm.
And how do we make these changes in the world? And I'm reminded of a little local restaurant that I love to go have breakfast in a few times a week. And I was sitting with a friend, and this very lovely man, African-American man, walked in with his daughter in his arms. And I have a thing for little kids, and his daughter and I made eye contact, and my arms reached out to her, and I just wanted to hold her. And he looked at me and he immediately got it. And he says, I can't let go of her. I said, I know that. And then we sat down and we started speaking, and we were talking about different things. They were visiting the island, and all of a sudden something stopped me, and I looked at him and I said, oh my God, this is the most important conversation in the world going on right now. And what I realize is neither one of us or both of us naturally saw the other as not other.
Mm,
And what I got in that moment is that these shifts we're talking about, this returning we're speaking about, we have countless opportunities every day, you know, in the place we have breakfast with our loving partners, with business associates, where I don't think we can do this as a technique, where something can naturally surface that is inclusive and unconditional, and there's no words to describe it, but I feel like when that occurs, it's like a little pebble falling into a lake, and something begins to move. And we all live in the same world. I've never experienced so much division, and yet I no longer have two bank accounts. I only have one. It's a bank account of good feelings. And so my work is the same, regardless of whatever is going on in the world. And I see that those changes happen one moment at a time, one instance at a time, just in the midst of this lovely conversation. And I'm very grateful to have been invited to be part of this.
Jacob, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean. I have my own, perhaps, definition of it. But say a little bit more about you only have one choice.
I don't have a choice at all. my life has felt choiceless for a long time. It's like when I began speaking a few minutes ago, what I shared is that as each of you spoke, something came forth. That something didn't come from me, it came to me. I don't know from where it comes. I find that that's what moves my life throughout the day. It's not so much a mental process, it's something that is guiding me. So just like an apple tree, I can fulfill my reason for being here. And so for me, I experience it as choiceless. For someone else, they may experience it in a very, very different way. I'll tell you what comes up. I saw some friends at a coffee shop a few months ago, and we were sitting there, and there was a couple there that I knew, and one of them started talking about the vaccine, and that they were very against the vaccine. And they said to me, well, what do you think about the vaccine? And I said, I don't really think about it much. And she said, well, you wouldn't have it, would you? You wouldn't take it. And as I said, well, as a matter of fact, I did. Well, why would you do such a thing? I said, I was just guided to do that. And she said, well, I'll never understand that. And I said to her, do you remember when you fell in love with your husband? She said, yeah. I said, was there anything you could do about it? She said, absolutely not. I said, what if we took your 10 closest girlfriends and we sat them here at the table with us and they all gazed upon your lovely husband? Do you think they would all fall in love with him? She said, of course not. I said, well, who's right and who's wrong? And so we're each guided. My sense is on a very fundamental level, we are guided by something that slips beneath mental awareness, something that knows without a knower. And so for me, that's the way that I experience it. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that particular question.
Thanks, Jabin. I'd like to take us a little bit deeper and in a different direction for a moment. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to watch the session this morning that was called Breaking Free of the Man Box. But during it, 6 really incredible men talked about the work they do in the world and the work that they have done on themselves in working to eliminate the stereotypes and the patterns of learning that they were introduced to, that the world at the moment, and rightfully so in many ways, condemns as examples of the patriarchy and some of the qualities and characteristics that it imposes both on the world and on those of us who wear this body. And most of them spoke from such a heartfelt place about the struggle to eliminate that learning. So, and since this is called the Masculine Dialogues, what I'd like to do is take advantage of the time that we have with you who wear the feminine form to talk about some of the specific things that you think that men can do to be more receptive, more available to balance, to, if the word is not returned, to find for the first time a premise or a platform through which greater harmony, greater collaboration and cooperation with the feminine can be experienced by the world.
George, I'll respond to part of what I think you're asking. And first, I want to say I appreciate you asking. That's not a question, in my experience, that many men ask. At least the men that I have known, and I've worked with men my whole life, my whole professional life, certainly. I think I'm going to go around the block, though, again, in the way I respond first. I'm not sure that I could effectively say, this is what I think men ought to do in order to come to a place that's new or renewed in a way that makes it, for all of us, more whole. I just did a very sloppy translation there, but I think I'd rather say, in response to what you described about this morning's or yesterday and this morning's conversation among the men, in order for me to even arrive on this screen with us, it's important to say that it's taken my entire life struggling, working, intuiting, falling down, getting back up to discover my own self-authorization, my own sense of wholeness as a woman, particularly a woman raised in the South with a whole set of conditions that create a compliance, even a complicity with the standard operating procedure manual called patriarchy. So I think it's first important to say that we women, I as a woman, or I identify as a woman, must do our own individual work in order to meet on level ground together. It starts in the interior, and then we can meet, what is that, out beyond right doing and wrong doing in that field Rumi talks about. Maybe what I want to say specifically to address your question is, I would invite any man who hasn't considered your question before, and by observation, in my experience, there are many, to understand that women struggle deeply and for a long period of time, many times, to come to a place to even be able to say, A, this isn't working for me the way we're dancing, and B, I don't care to play, but I would if we could do the following. If you could learn to hear a different kind of music and appreciate that it exists. That's a very big question you ask. And I feel inadequate in my response, but I do want to ground it in my own recognition that the only way I can join a conversation like this is to get clear with myself that I don't need permission from anyone.
Thanks, Celeste, as always, for your honesty as well as your thoughtfulness. Maybe if I fine-tune the question a little bit, and the question is, what can you support men in doing to make a transition that I think, although there are many men who would deny it, I believe someplace in our hearts, most of us know that change is required in order to play a significant or important role in helping to preserve humanity and the planet and other species, you know? So maybe that's a better way of framing it, you know? What could you or can you or do you see yourselves being able to support men in taking next steps?
I'd like to follow Celeste. The kind of work that Celeste is talking about, I just want to acknowledge I've been married for 42 years to a guy that, you know, I married him because he was the only person that talked like I did. People noticed that. We had conversations that just didn't stop. And yet every day, Celeste, that opportunity to do some work is there. I mean, I have a really good girlfriend. We were going to go to Bhutan for our 72nd birthdays. That was going to be our celebration. Some of you know her, Erica. And it got put off twice, and because of COVID. And we kept training. She's a mountain climber. So we kept training. And one day my husband came along with us and he had so much fun with us that he asked if he could come. Now that the trip was postponed once again, there was a chance for him to come along, right? And there's nobody I'd rather travel with than my husband. Our traveling is the Shekinah. It's magical. But in this case, I just looked at him and I said, well, you'll have to audition. And he said, what do you mean audition? And I said, you're about to go on an 8-mile hike with us to Hot Springs. And I want you to actually listen to how we talk to each other. Just see if you can notice anything about the way we talk to each other. And just be quiet for a while and listen. And then see if you can talk with us like that. And I have to say, I've always loved men. I have 3 brothers. I have a father I adore. I have grandsons and nephews. I have no granddaughters, even though we had all girls. And I do love the dance of the feminine and the masculine, both in myself and in them and in my husband. And we're a dynamic duo. We're meant to be together. And yet what women will tell you is that they're heard and seen differently by their girlfriends, by their feminine friends. There's no work. We actually like to listen to each other. And here's the point I want to make. Here's the thing I could offer men, and that I have offered Zev, my husband, is that when we listen to each other, we hear something much more than the words. We hear each other's hearts. We hear each other's bodies. We hear I hear so much when Sadina and I hang out sometimes.
Yeah.
I hear when she speaks, I'm not listening to what she's saying. I'm grokking, remember that word, I'm grokking, being with her. And no matter what's going on, it's delicious. She can be pissed off, she can be, but we're absolutely fed and nourished by each other when we're together like that. Now, I'm not saying all women are like that. I'm just saying, when you finally find your girlfriends, that's what it's like. And I would say that kind of listening, just Jacob said it a few minutes ago, that kind of listening is available in every single minute. The way he and that little girl saw each other and the way the father saw him see the little girl, and that is every single minute that is available. And all I would say is, like I said to my husband, you need to audition, is stop for a minute and actually allow yourself to listen fully to what is going on, even though in the beginning it seems like nothing's going on. And what it is I think, again, I was lucky because I was a woman, and when my babies were born, and now my grandchildren, they're between 2 and 8, these little boys. When my babies were born, I had to understand what they were saying before they could speak. It never even occurred to me that we didn't understand each other until they started putting words to it. And there was almost a little bit of sadness for me that they were actually going to start using words that people thought they understood the same. And I knew they didn't. That there was this period of like having to put words to something that you absolutely needed to know words for. And I know it's like that when you're in love. Jacob talked about being in love, with your husband, your wife. And yet it's kind of like falling in love with whoever's speaking. It's kind of like falling in love with the sound that's coming out of the person sitting next to you. And it's available all the time. It's just, you have to want it. You have to want to be in that space listening. So that's just one example of what I'm talking about. I'll stop there because I think I kind of got it across.
Oh, you definitely got it across. I have to comment now. I feel absolutely the same way. And that has been kind of it's been a challenge for me, because I know, intellectually that men need, they need their man cave, they need certain things. And I pay attention to all of that. And women, our oxytocin goes up when we're together. Our hormones really ignite when we're together. And you described it perfectly, Heidi. And we just got a chat from a friend of ours, a dear friend, Deborah, who said acknowledgement. And that's what I started with, was acknowledgement. And I think she hit the nail on the head, that really that's what you're saying, Heidi, and what you're saying, Jacob. I love what you said about the countless opportunities, because it's so true. They're countless. They're every moment, if you're open to receiving the gift, whatever it is that person has to give. And it does take taking a breath and being patient and really wanting to be there, being in the moment. And that, I think, is that balance too. I just have to say, it feels so hopeful and life-saving to me that men now, particularly in this configuration that you guys have put together, Jim and George and Lion, to have men admit that they've contributed to many of the universal challenges that humanity faces really feels hopeful and life-saving to me. It's what I believe is needed. It's this embracing of our frailties rather than defending against them, looking for the similarities rather than the differences. And that's what I think we need, the acknowledgement, that wholeness. Yeah, I screwed up, so what? But here I am right now, and I am who I am because of everything that came before that I was willing to do, whether I messed up or not. I think we're so hard on the people around us, and the world right now is hard on itself. So for me, it's that acknowledgement, just showing up with an awareness and acceptance of really, she says in the book too, Matri, that we show up with deep respect, ready to listen and learn from everybody. And I just love that. So the definition of what a man needs and the support and everything you're talking about, George, I don't really have like a specific answer. I heard a lot on the men's yesterday on the relationship to soul. My gosh, creativity, getting together in community, art. I've seen my own husband, George, just absolutely flower doing his art, his beautiful sculpture, and having people come and witness that. And just to be around it, it's been a wonderful thing. And I see him playing when he does that. So for me, I would like to support men in playing. I could definitely say that, and having more fun. And I think the definition of what a man is needs to be upgraded. It's time for us to focus also on the good of masculinity. Heidi and I talked just briefly before about, men, we love their protection. This has really been wonderful, this conversation, to bring up, what is it that I really want? Well, men have these incredible qualities that we don't have. And it's such a balance, right? Sometimes they fight the good fight, all the things that we know about men. And I think they've had a hard time trying to be stalwart and do it all, and all these things that are associated with masculinity. I'd like to see them just be a protector and an ally of the feminine, of women, children, elders, the earth, anybody in harm's way. And I mentioned before in our first dialogue, which was great too, so I think of the role of the gentleman, the respectful, thoughtful gentleman. And I know that's still around, and I hope it's time to bring back some of that gentle goodness, because men do it like women can't. We all need each other.
I just want to say that one of the reasons for that question is that, and it was so obvious to me this morning in that conversation. John, has John joined us? Richard?
No, he hasn't responded to anything,
Okay,
George.
fine. Thank you very much. So one of the things that was said repeatedly was that as men of conscious men, thoughtful, caring, conscious men, as they discover the programming that they have been encased in, which is why Tony Porter called it a man box that we needed to get out of. What happens is we wake up to particular levels of unconsciousness that have those levels have allowed us to visit upon the world some of the toxicity that a number of women have pointed out for a very long time. Now, I also know that women have their own brand of toxicity that they also visit upon the world, because we all, men and women alike, have a series of wounds that we deal with. Some we bring in my belief system, and some we experience while we're here. But the point is that each of them, when they spoke about some of the realizations, they spoke about the fact that they could not believe some of the things that they did when they were living under those belief systems that they had been inducted into. And many of them said they didn't know if they could ever necessarily completely release or forgive themselves for some of the crimes and misdemeanors that they visited upon the earth. So one of the things I think personally I would like to talk about or hear is, how do women release that toxicity, or how do they give and support men in both forgiving themselves and in being forgiven?
I'll jump in with this, George. Thank you for that beautiful clarifying of your questioning, and thank you for all that you've contributed to those who have spoken. So much resonance. When I feel into this question, I remember the heart of the mother, of the great mother within all of us. And as many of you spoke of, the great work of integrating our own masculine and feminine, sacred masculine, sacred feminine, toxic or corrupt patriarchy and masculine, and likewise for the feminine. And so for me, it's always going to come back to the work we're doing in our interior and how we wear that in the world, how we become that whole, integrated, compassionate being that can love with the heart of the mother who loves all her children, who forgives everything, who is like the ocean mother, Yemaya, the salt waters, so receptive. We are pouring toxicity into her body, and yet she continues, though many of the oceans are dying, but she is a cleansing force of the divine mother. And so when I feel into, these conversations, and I'm seeing some of what's coming up in the chat of, for example, how many women suffer domestic violence, how many women are raped even per minute, but there's no word man in any of those statements. It's the men who are doing those atrocities. And so for me, there's a sense of acknowledging with so much compassion the abuse that creates more abuse, the violence that has created more violence, and even where the divine feminine inside of all of us can both have an ability to forgive and embrace and hold and compassionately love all aspects, all of our beingness, and also have a fierce boundary and know how to say no and no more. And the journey of what it takes for a woman and a man in his own feminine to find that voice. And so what can men do? They can learn how to honor their own deep feminine, how to find that place of compassion and forgiveness in themselves, how to take those steps to bring more wholeness and communication and forgiveness in their relationships with the feminine, how to move in the world in a way where we wake up to the blind rank, we wake up to the domination and the extraction, and then we listen and pray and dialogue and sense and bring in from the dreaming and the intuition and the deep feeling. How do we move forward in a world when we are in love and reverence? How do we move forward in a world where we're not dominating and extracting, but we are in deep protection and preservation, which I believe are some of the qualities of the divine masculine? And so this is such a rich conversation, and I don't want to take too much space. So I'm going to pause there because there's always more to say. Thank you.
Please, Jacob.
Heidi said something really profound that touched me. She was talking about one of her children when she had a child, and she realized that even though the child couldn't communicate verbally, she always knew exactly what was going on. And that's still true for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We all know, even though we don't know how we know. And when asked to explain, we can't possibly explain it because it's something beyond our linguistics.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that guiding part of us. And so my sense is that natural part of our humanity, the part that knows what's needed before it's asked, is so foundational to the question that you're posing. George mentioned about the man box, and there's a man box, there's a woman box, there's a children's box, we have boxes for everything, and they're all illusory boxes, but we like playing with them. And the problem with the issue of choice and boxes is that there's always someone who's chosen correctly and someone who's chosen incorrectly. And so what we all notice is that the moment the pointing finger comes at us, there's a digging in of the heels. I'm not sure if any of us know where any of this began, or what the causative factor was. Was it that thing that happened when I was 2 years old? Or was it something that happened to an ancestor 10 million years ago? We just know that this is what's here right now. And my sense is that there has to be an embracing of the fact that we don't know. And what I've come to realize in my own relationship is that so much of our communication is about telling other people how they should be. And what I've come to realize is I don't know whether we actually change or we just become more accepting of who we've always been. But my sense is we all come to whatever we come to in whatever time is appropriate for each of us. And I don't know how that exists. I found myself almost in tears a few moments ago while each of you was sharing, and that, wow, I feel so graced not only to be part of the conversation, but to be actually having the experience in my life of what it is we're trying to convey. And it almost brings me to tears now, because it's so magnificent that I sort of feel that anyone who comes upon it can no longer avoid it. And someone said something about playing. Sadina said, I like it. She talked about Georgia sculpting and playing, and what came immediately to me was that I'd never had a hobby. That my life was always about taking care of whatever needed to be taken care of. And so I realized that my meditation is cooking dinner each evening or washing the dishes. I especially love folding clothes. That all those things that we say have not much consequence. I think that's the important work. I believe that the way we handle those things, whether it's emailing or paying our bills or whatever it is what perhaps shows up everywhere else. And so I think my playing is my life, and noticing that everything catches my eye is looking for me. Anyway, that's what came.
Jacob, there's an old Russian expression that says, if you give children something to play with and they don't cry, then everything is okay. You know, before we get too far away from it, Gabriella, I want you, I've been working on a book for several years called A Man Is. And it's a series of my own writings and the collection of the writings of other men. And along the way, I've also tried to collect a whole series of facts about men that will be segues between the chapters. And one of the things, the set of facts that I discovered, and I invite anyone on the call or anyone who's listening from afar, to Google violence against men as well as violence against women. And I was shocked. In certain categories, murder and certainly rape, men are the dominant perpetrators. But there are a whole set of things that are violent, that are not only perpetrated by men, but they're perpetrated by women as well. And one of the things that I think it's important in our dialogue, not just here, but in general, in society, is to realize that there are forms of abuse, guilt, shame, criticism, that women are as effective with, in a negative, toxic sense, as men are with some of the physical violence that they perpetuate in the world around us. So just in terms of finding right balance, I encourage you all everywhere to do a little Googling and pay attention to what you discover, because it was an eye-opener for me. So as we bend around into this last 30 minutes, what I'd like us to either do is to continue what we're talking about, but it would also be important, I think, if we talked about some of the things that women can do to, quote, return to balance, and how men can support you.
Yeah. George, I'd like to say something both about what we were just talking about and moving into that question. You know, I love Simone Weil. She's the one who says that absolute unmixed attention is prayer. Attention is her devotion. She also said all sins are attempts to fill voids. Every sin is an attempt to fly from emptiness. And there is no doubt that by withdrawing love and attention, that the feminine has also been able to inflict unbelievable pain and harm. It is our given it's our given privilege actually to be able to give attention and light just by being. And if we aren't doing that, we're creating great suffering. I want to say something about toxicity. I was in Cambodia. I was between a job in India and one in Japan, and I had 4 days to travel by myself. And I went to Cambodia, and this young guide, wonderful guide, took me to his village and pointed out his house and the house next to him. And he said that the Khmer Rouge had lived in that house and had murdered his father. His neighbor had been a Khmer Rouge, and his neighbors had murdered his father, right? And I was shocked. He said it with such equanimity and kind of like just telling you what happened in the neighborhood. And I said, how can you live with that? I don't understand. Your neighbors. And he looked at me and I know he was telling me the truth. He looked at me, said, because we could have been them. It was like, I was speechless. He said, we could have been them, and we weren't. And there was a moment in my college years where I was in the process of about to be raped by a friend, a guy that I thought I trusted. And he was definitely on a roll, and he was not there anymore, if you know what I mean. There was nobody home. It was this, all sins are attempts to fill voids. I was facing not him, but the void. And in that moment, I got incredibly calm. I mean, he was so strong. And when people say, well, you should have fought or something, that's a joke. I mean, he was so strong. There was no getting out of that. And I just looked him in the eye. And this was out of total calmness. I just looked at him. It reminds me of my Cambodian friend. And I just said to him, I see you. I see you. And I see that you see me. And he started to cry and he let me go. And then I said, now just take me home. And he did. But it was like in that moment, what I saw was the most unbelievably painful void in this person that I had thought was just a guy. It never occurred to me that that was what he was living with, that experience. And that what he needed was to be seen, not to be vilified. And fortunately for me, it worked in that moment. I'm sure that doesn't mean that would work. But in that moment, I got that experience of it could have been me. It really could have been me doing that. And the final thing is, I want to thank you, George, because I know especially after being on the conversations yesterday, both of them, how, and I will see the one this morning too, how important men's work is with each other. How, there have been unspeakable suffering committed by mothers and women on men without having any idea that they were doing it. And the men's work is so very important. It's just, to encourage any man, any masculine, forget about man, any masculine spirit to go through the kind of work that is needed for that embodiment. And I'll just leave with one other Simone Weil quote. She says, human beings are so made that the ones who do the crushing feel nothing. It is the person crushed who feels what is happening. Unless one is placed on the side of the oppressed to feel with them, one cannot understand. And that, I guess, the sorrow and the grief for somebody who can't feel the crushing that they're doing is kind of what that experience was for me. So I'll turn it over to my sisters and my brother.
Heidi, I just, that thing that you described, that seeing, I don't know whether you remember, but in the third harmony, one of the things that is discussed is that one story after story of individuals who have stepped into the gap and prevented great violence and whatnot, that has come largely from their ability to go into a place where they do exactly what you did.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so the stories are quite extraordinary. And if any of you out there are listening, there's a book called The Third Harmony, and there's a film that's all about nonviolence. That's a really beautiful piece of work.
Mm.
Mhm.
So
Heidi,
more, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's all right, George. Um, your stories and the weaving you just did, Heidi, are a remarkable gift to me, and I think to all of us. I hear my interpretation of what you just said is that our job together is to help each other out of the trauma zone,
Yes.
to however we name ourselves, male and female, masculine and feminine, everything in between, is to find a way, those of us who choose to show up in places like this, to help each other through the trauma zone and onto safer ground, even if it means we have to do that in the form of warriorship. And I heard some of that in what you said, Gabriella, in the most elegant and kind and compassionate way.
Mhm.
That there are yeses and there are nos, and there are I see yous. And that those of us who are feeling our way into the whole place, the not the hole in the ground, the WHOLE place, is we got to move through the trauma. Because you're right, Jacob, you said something, and George, you alluded to it as well. You know, is this from 10 million years ago that we carry in our epigenetic structure, or is this what happened this morning in our encounter with a coworker or a loved one, some explosion or another? What is it we're putting all over each other? How can we reel that back in and show up, stand face to face and say, I see you, I hear you, I'm listening, I'm feeling you.
Mm.
You know, Celeste, I find myself awestruck in my own marriage with my wife. I find myself often saying love is the answer regardless the question, because I've seen so many things, whether they be habitual behaviors or even physical symptomatology, literally disappear within both of us because we feel so loved and cared for. And I remember at our wedding, someone had said to me, what have you learned about love? And I said, well, one aspect of love is that we fall in love with the aspects of our partners that they think need to be changed. That we find that these little behaviors that maybe at some point in time created a perturbance, now it's just some other aspect of loving them. I don't know how to, you know, when my wife and I go to sleep at night, one of the things that often happens is she says to me, assume the position. And that means to put my left arm like this, and she tucks her head right here on my heart. And then the next thing that comes out of her is, this is the best place in the whole wide world to be right now. I think we have to, we need to hold each other and make that place the best place in the whole world to be right now. And I have to tell you, all of you are just unbelievable. I have just, I always say relationships only work when everyone is the same height. And I am so grateful to feel as tall as I perceive each of you. It's really something special. What's happening now. I feel very touched by it. Thank you so much.
I have to say something. Jacob, I knowing you for a little while and having the pleasure of seeing you from time to time, it's such a treat such a treat to hear you share your heart. It just always opens my heart. So
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for your sharing. And Celeste, you rounded that up. Heidi's sharing, that was just so rich, so beautifully. What you said about helping each other out of the trauma is right on. I think that is really the clue. Thank you for that vulnerable sharing, Heidi. I have to say that as a woman, because Georgie started this off asking us, telling us, Google what everyone has done. We're just all soul is what is coming to me over and over again. Like Jacob started with the babies, they don't know what they are. They're just alive and they love each other. That's really where we need to get to. I love those babies in the commercial. They don't know. And there was something, and Gabriella, just thank you for bringing us always back to the earth. And, I look at so much of this as an individual journey, and that was brought up in the man's relationship with the soul, along with another beautiful thing about the pilgrimage to the center of the soul was what was said for the collective, for not just individuals. But I'm seeing every individual, like you said, Jacob, needs to be held, needs to know. And that was that same sharing that Heidi was talking about. When you're just open to the person that's in front of you and you realize, have compassion. It all comes down to compassion. They're me. I could do the same thing they've done, That's such a beautiful reminder. And I'm jumping around because there's so many things in my mind right now so the individual healing is what I really believe this is about. And coming back to our souls. They're all about beauty and wholeness and oneness. There's no blame or prejudice, or we're just all good and sacred. Our missteps, our wins, everything that's made who we are, this incomparable person that we are right here, right now. And if we can just we're at a precipice, and it's time to love and forgive ourselves into this wholeness is what I'm seeing. And I just want to read very briefly Dr. Alberto Villoldo, such an amazing shaman and psychotherapist. He said something that just feels so right to me. He says, humans are in the process of evolving into homo luminous beings whose energy fields are luminous. And he talks about the energy shifts taking place now. He says, this is our greatest task, to take that quantum leap individually, because as we do it for ourselves, we do it for the entire planet. Each and every one of us, when we choose truth, when we choose light, when we choose a feminine theology of cooperation and sustainability, we're transforming our world. And that's really what I think we're all talking about. It's just compassion and love. And this crisis is providing a container for growth. It's an opportunity for all of us to refocus our attention in the center, and our hearts and our souls, that we're one.
Thank you, Sedina. Celeste and Sedina, both you talked about trauma in different ways. And it's interesting because yesterday afternoon in the panel that on man and relationship to soul, we got to talking about initiations and the relationship and the value of initiations, both for men and women in society, and how many of them have dissipated. And so Tom Moore had an interesting thing to say, and he said what you said, Celeste, and that is that perhaps the initiations of this time are that when trauma occurs, we show up in support of that healing, and that really in that way, initiations can be taking place every single minute of every day in some way or another, And We have just a few minutes left. Could we just go around, and if there's one comment, one thought that arises, can you share it with us, please?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you, everyone. Just because it hasn't been spoken and everything that has been spoken is so golden and beautiful. Thank you. I just want to speak to bringing in the medicine of the more than human world, and that we as humans, from my perspective, cannot make it through this great turning without intimate love and reverent relationships with all of the many other species, seen and unseen energies around us and on this planet. There's so much wisdom and modeling and frequency and co-regulation that the natural world can give our own nervous systems, and then educate us in how to move forward in a truly sane and creative, beautiful way. Thank you.
Jacob, I want to say thank you for something you said. I heard you say, I especially love folding clothes.
Yeah.
And why I just truly adore that. And I will probably, I hope we get to be together again in other forums and other ways, but I will always remember this and associate it with you for this reason. My mother and I have a code phrase. She's still alive here on the planet, and I feel very grateful for that. Every now and then she'll call me out of nowhere and she'll say, I'll say to her, she'll say, what are you doing? And I'll say what I was doing. And I'll say to her, what are you doing? And she'll sometimes say, I've been ironing. And the code means I've been praying. Because her mother used to say, and her mother before that, the best way to pray is to iron.
Iron.
Oh.
And so I'm handing, I wish I could touch your hand or your finger, Jacob, but I'm handing you a thread from the women in my life who pray in a way that reminds me of the way you talk. And I want to call it out because you've shown, and George, you certainly have as well in your way, but you've shown us a side of a man that many of us don't often have the privilege of touching, particularly in a forum like this. And I just want to say, I bow to that. I bow to you.
Wow, that's it's for me when I'm folding, and I also do iron. It's giving life to a prayer. It's not about praying, it's about my life being a prayer and just taking care of little things that make everything as beautiful as it was when you got there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus is quoted as saying, when you see up as down and down as up, when the outside and the inside are the same, when you see a man as a woman and a woman as a man, then you shall enter the kingdom. And what my sense is of what he's saying is that if we're graced, perhaps we come into a state of choicelessness, where everything just is. We use the word belief a lot these days. And George said several times, Google it. Google the word belief, look at the words that are synonymous with it, and then look at the antonyms, and you'll discover something really profound. The opposite of belief is truth. My sense is we're all looking for truth beyond opinion. A truth that perhaps we cannot speak. a truth that has no choice associated with it, we cannot not follow that. And I feel like I've been touched by that, by each of you today. So thank you so much.
Well, I'll just say thank you for that, Jacob. I've been touched by everyone here today too, and I'm so in appreciation of having this conversation, being willing to lean into each other's gifts, you know, because really we all have these jewels, is what I feel. And that's true of everyone we meet, you know, those countless opportunities that you talked about, Jacob, and to give and receive and lean into deeper compassion, especially right now as our humanity is hurting, and open our hearts to each other so that we can find this balance that George, you started off with, acceptance, awareness, and mainly our interconnectedness. You know, because we're interconnected, we're all one, and it's just dropping those veils, looking at our true nature, honoring our souls, and our soul will always call for love. You know, it's that holding. So it's just long overdue for women and men to explore and collaborate to create new perspectives and strategies so we can have a chance to thrive on this endangered planet. And I'm just grateful for every one of you. Thank you. And everyone listening, and thank you for all the comments in the chat. It's been really fantastic. Thank you.
So we're coming to the end. Heidi, did we miss you?
Well, I just have one thing. I want to thank, well, everybody. It's just been delicious being here with you. And but I wanted to thank Jim. I see Jim's picture. I'm not sure he's on, but yesterday he told us that we all know about Gaia, but very few of us know about Pan, who is the one who like lights it up and, you know, impregnates Gaia. And I've been thinking a lot about Pan since he brought up that story. And I just want to say that what today was about for me is not turning away. It's about turning on. And to me, that's Pan. So I love Gaia. I love Pan. And, you know, nature. Absolutely, Gabriella. We got to include all of those spirits.
So look, just a couple of quick things, and then we'll let Jim come in for a close. I see he's awake, and I'm glad that he is. Tomorrow, day 3, Wednesday, the 17th at 8 p.m., session 5 is the apology. Eve Ensler, now known as V, has written a new book, and she's going to talk about the apology really of the patriarchy, but specifically of the apology that she wished she had gotten from her father for a lot of pain and suffering that she endured. In the afternoon at noon, Lion Goodman with another stellar group of men will be talking about men in relationship to men. I'd like to close with 2 things. A lot of things in the chat have been about this book, Matri, M-A-T-R-I, Letters from the Mother.
George, hold it up, George. Thank you.
Zoanne Nicholson. Matri is the author. And I want to close with something that you all probably know well. And I also want to invite all of our panelists to go into the chat. The link will be in the chat at the end if you're able to. This is from the Hopi elders. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It says, you have been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. What are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It's time to speak your truth. Create community. Be good to one another. And do not look outside yourself for a leader. This could be a good time. There is a river flowing now very fast. It's so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they're being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has a destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore. These words. Push off into the middle of the river. Keep our eyes open and our heads above water. At this time in history, we ought to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf. Could we live this? Is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. So we're the ones we've been waiting for. Jim, close us out, will you?
Thank you.
Thank you, George, for your heartfulness. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge George and everything that he's done to make these masculine dialogues, but your life, George, the fact that somebody can read these ancient words with such raw emotion speaks to the kind of man I think all us men are trying to become. And I think I just want to take that moment and also honor you women. I felt a certain luminosity in each of you in this session. It's been like a golden aura as your words just dovetailed with each other, and Jacob, the way it was like a beautiful tapestry today. And Heidi, when you were telling your story in Cambodia, what came to me was those words from Dante in the Divine Comedy, where, as he describes hell, he says that he had never heard of a crime that in his heart he knew that he couldn't commit. And I think there's a great leveling in that realization. And I think your story is a portal to a new world of apology and forgiveness that all of us in this highly traumatized world, where we're not only traumatizing each other, but we're the recipients of transgenerational trauma that's been building up in the world system. And I wanted to accentuate this particular aspect of what you said, because tomorrow morning with Eve Ensler, we're really going to go in some ways into the heart of darkness with a woman who was brutalized in ways that are so shocking you can hardly bear to hear about it. And all she wanted from her brutalizer, who was her father, was an apology, which never came.
Yeah.
And how do you resolve trauma without an apology? What does forgiveness mean without apology? How do you understand both apology and forgiveness in the depths of the heart of darkness? And so I think this session now has really set the context of, I would say, vulnerability, but also containment, for that discussion to be able to take place, held with love and understanding and deep compassion, which I believe, as you've all embodied today, is essential if we're going to work through all this in a way that redeems. And so I I just want to tell you that, like George, I feel profoundly moved by your grace today. Your wisdom has been delivered with deep grace, and in the end, that's at the heart of the redemption that we all seek. So I just want to acknowledge all of you and thank you all. And tomorrow we'll deepen the dialogue. And as George said, just to conclude, there's a vast distance between discussion, which divides and seeks to conquer, and dialogue, which seeks to embrace and thereby to understand more deeply. And I think we've had a deep dialogue today, and that augurs well for our unfolding sessions for the masculine dialogues, because we're touching on one of the most sensitive issues that exist in the human domain. That for too long we've been afraid to encounter because we didn't know how to dialogue about it. And I think we've done that today. And I want to just honor all of you for leading the way. So thank you, everyone. Another great session. We'll see you again tomorrow at 8 a.m. For our 5th session with Eve Ensler. And then we'll unfold the masculine dialogues from there. Bye for now.
Don't
Thank
forget
you,
the
Jim.
chat. Don't forget the chat link, please, for those of you who can join. Blessings. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Thank you.